Hello and thank you for tuning in. You're watching The Property Guide on ET Now. I'd like to think of this show as your one-stop shop for all the information you need when investing in property. Now, given the overwhelming response we got from you last week to our chat about buying land, we've decided to spend more time this week on investing in a plot of land instead of buying an apartment. We'll look at the pros and cons. We'll also give you a checklist of things to keep in mind when you're buying land in this country. Now remember, if you have any questions, you can write to us to the propertyguide@et-now.com. It'll be our pleasure to answer your questions on this show. On the show this week, we'll start by telling you whether buying land is a better option than buying an apartment. We'll also tell you which cities are witnessing the best growth in plotted developments. We'll tell you reason behind a 25% jump in average property prices in the OMR region in Chennai over the past couple of years. We'll give you investment options in the Pune realty market. Joining us today on the show, Jayashree Kurup, Head of Content and Research at magicbricks.com from our Delhi studio. In Mumbai with me, Gulam Zia, Executive Director at Knight Frank, and Arvind Nandan, Executive Director of Consultancy Services at Cushman & Wakefield. So I have a really strong panel and I'm looking forward to this discussion. Now we all know, all the investors in this market know, that land is a finite commodity and owning a piece of land often seems like a far better investment than buying an apartment. Today we're going to talk about buying land. When we chatted last week with a couple of our other guests, they all said that buying land is a far better option. And you know that land will do well. But it just seems like a high risk, high return option as well. So I want to ask you, first of all, buying land, buying a plot of land for residential purposes vis-a-vis buying an apartment as an investment, which one should we choose if we're looking to invest in property for the next, say, 3 or 4 years?
I think that's a great question and a difficult question at the same time, because there is a yes and a no on both the sides. Buying plot of land is definitely a good option because it gives you a greater amount of liberty, and of course you can take your own time and you have all the variables in control. However, I think it's a slightly riskier option as well, and an option which is fraught with a bit of uncertainties.
If I were to come to you as a client and ask you, I want to make an investment, a small ticket, somewhere across this country that will give me strong returns over 5 years, would you recommend I buy land or I buy an apartment?
On so much, I would say yes, go for land.
Go for land.
But please remember, as an investor, I'll also want to ask you two things. What is the kind of time frame you have in your mind, and what are your capabilities for managing your investment over a period of time? If these two things are sufficiently answered, if you have great capability of handling and managing your land investment, and at the same time you have a substantial amount of timing, then go for land.
Gulam, the thing about buying land today, there's an interesting new development that's happened where developers are actually selling plotted land. Vis-a-vis buying it from the development authority or the government in any city. So would you recommend we go through a developer and buy one of those plotted developments, or should we just buy a plotted land from the Hyderabad Development Authority or the Bangalore Development Authority? Now,
the two that you spoke about, if I talk about buying it from developer, obviously it will be costlier. Because a developer would, when a developer is selling the property, why would developers sell a land? A developer would sell a land only if he has added some value to it. So like for example, if he has acquired 100 acre of land, for him to do the infrastructure, etc., he will have to set aside for roads, for some other essential commodities and this and that. Almost 30 to 35% of land he will have to set aside, so that price will automatically be loaded onto the land that you are buying, because the remaining 35 cannot be sold. So obviously that land will be costly. On the other side, if I talk about the development authorities and so on, well, for them the economic model does not work on collecting money from a buyer. Partly it is captured by the taxpayers' money as well. Because comparably, a government authority will obviously, first of all, give you a better title and also sell you slightly cheaper than what a developer would be able to sell you at. So these differential will always be there, very, very evident when you are out in the market.
All right, I want to bring in Jayashree here. Jayashree, from the action that you see on the website on a regular basis, which of our cities right now is seeing the most activity when it comes to plotted development or buying land?
See, Faye, right now about 14% of all supply on our site is plotted development, and about 16% of the demand on our site is for plotted development. Across Indian cities, I found that smaller cities, especially cities that are now urbanizing, the demand for land is very, very high. And land is something, we are used to. We are used to having bungalows and single units to stay in. But as the cities grow, the convenience of apartment living is growing. So if you look at the supply, I think cities like Bangalore, Chennai, Gurgaon, Noida, Lucknow, these are all cities which have very high supply of land. In terms of demand, I think Bangalore, Pune, Delhi, these are the areas where you see a lot of demand for land as well.
Well, so that's interesting. Jayashree gave us a list of land where we're seeing supply and land where we're seeing demand. Ghulam, if I were to ask you to give us a recommendation of which cities it makes most sense to look at buying land in, of the list that she gave us, which ones would those be?
I would rather look out for places where the economic drivers are going to be strong in near future. If I have to indicate, there are many of these new infrastructure activities that the government is taking up, like for example the industrial corridor, etc., on which there are many new greenfield cities are coming up.
Give us some cities.
Well, since I was specifically talking about the industrial corridor, Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor, on that every state currently has one node on which they are developing industrial cities. Like for example, Gujarat, they have one node close to Ahmedabad, a city called Dholera. It's a green city. If I give you these names, they don't make sense to you anymore, to right now. Like in Maharashtra, it is Shendre, Bilkin area. You won't have heard of that. These are all industrial developments which are coming up. Like for example, in Rajasthan, in fact, Rajasthan, I cannot not mention it. It's the Neem Rana and all that area, which is even closer to Delhi, Gurgaon, because it's hardly a distance of about 2-3 hours of traveling from Delhi, from Gurgaon. So these are all cities which are developing, which are coming up in future. And that is where I would put my money if I have to look at growth as the only reason for me to invest.
What about you, Arvind? If I were to ask you, and you're the tier 2, tier 3 guy, if I were to ask you to pick places to invest in land, what would that be?
There are places like Bhubaneswar, like Kochi, which are trying to very strongly rejuvenate themselves. The local authorities are working on developing either new cities or remodeling the existing parts, various existing parts of these cities. So there is, a whole plethora of options in front of you.
Ghulam, one very quick question before we move on. You did name certain areas in growth corridors that we can look at. For someone who buys land in those areas right now, what sort of a return on capital value can they expect over the next few years?
Well, currently in most of these areas, because the acquisitions are going on, the markets are already hot enough, already have been heating for last 2-3 years. However, in most of these areas, the acquisition values would still be, 50 lakh to a crore for an acre, kind of a number in most of these growth areas. And if I talk about a 5 to 10 years growth period for these locations, then I would safely guess that the growth will have to be about 2 to 2.5 crores an acre kind of a number when the developments are happening.
All right, so it's high risk, it's high maintenance, it's also high return. When we come back from this very quick break, we'll talk about a checklist that you can keep in mind when you're buying land. We'll also give you a list of plotted development across the country. Welcome back. You're watching the Property Guide in ET Now. Thank you so much for staying with us. We were talking about buying land, and now I want to talk about making a checklist for buying land so that you make sure that the land you've bought is a solid investment. Jayashree, I want to come to you first. Give us a checklist for anybody looking to buy land right now. What should they keep in mind?
Say when you buy an apartment, if you go to a financial institution, the projects are funded, you know that that's where, some of the due diligence is done. When it comes to land, it's far more difficult because it's difficult to get a loan to buy a plot of land. As a result, you'll have to do your checks yourself. First of all, titles. It's very, very important to check that the titles are all clean. The licenses, the development rights, because when you buy land, if it is agricultural and it has not been converted to, whatever the other land use is, this change in land use has not been done, then you will be stuck with land and you will find it very difficult to check, make the changes. Therefore, find out what is the category in which the land is registered. These are all very important, and that's why I always recommend that you buy from developers or buy from development authorities, because the titles come clean. And in land, the biggest problem is that the use and the titles are always difficult to find.
Arvind, she did talk about finance, and normally when you get finance or a loan on any piece of land or property, there's a thorough check that's done before that. Is it important to make sure that your finance company has cleared the land? I
think it's very important. But before that, let me add to the earlier point. Everybody needs to know, if you're a lay investor, you're not a real estate player, not an expert, you need to know what all to do. I think you need 4 key agencies to help you there. The first agency that you need is a legal advisor. She mentioned that. The second agency that you need is a good architect to help you understand if the permissions are in place, if the plans are all okay, and things like that. Number 3, you need a good financial planner, which probably would be a financing company or somebody. Fourth, if you can afford it and if it is essential, a valuer who can give you the exact value. If you have these 4 agencies supporting you, probably your due diligence will be complete in all respects. Probably Gulam could add something if I missed it, but I think prima facie these 4. Now let's come to the point of the question that you put forth, whether one should go for a financing or not. Wherever financing is available, I would say try and avail that, even if it is a small percentage. The big buffer or the big security that it provides you is that the financing company, which in all probability is a bank or a housing finance company, has already done these due diligences. So a lot of that has already been checked, put in place, so you will be quite assured that these things have been taken care and you're relatively safe in your investment. So wherever available, although it's not available too much, but wherever available, I would say one should go for that.
Gulam, there's a third checklist that we have to keep in mind, which is the use of the land. So if I buy a plot of land, what is the rest of the layout going to look like? What are the roads going to look like going forward? What sort of commercial activity is that area going to see? Can you put that down in a checklist, how we can check and make sure that the plot of land I'm buying is not just going to continue to just remain a plot of land going forward?
There's no such flow chart which will tell you that first check if it is for education or for this or that. I'm saying if it is not for the purpose that you are trying to buy it for, then it is not the land for you. Right. And one more specific thing I would want to highlight in this entire melee of buying land, extremely important to understand the environmental aspect of it. Especially in coastal cities, CRZ plays an extremely important role. Even otherwise, if it is not a coastal city, then forest lands are something which can actually make or break your investment completely. It can wipe off if you're buying a land which could be all a forest land. You can't really do anything over there. But if I have to add one more agency to what Arvind was talking about, I will perhaps look at some geologist or some land survey expert or somebody who could have done the mapping, the satellite mapping of the land for last 25-30 years, because it's extremely important. Even if about 25 years back, if there were forestation on your land, then you are in a soup. So clearing your environmental hurdle is one of the very important aspects, and it is growing in importance as the times go by.
If you want to buy land directly from a developer, here is a list of interesting plotted developments that are available in the market right now. Now, if you're looking to invest in a plot of land, here are some recommendations for plotted developments. Let's start with Bangalore. In Devanahalli, Nitesh Estates Long Island, Shobha Developers Landscape, and Chance City Developers Trans Magnolia. The Confident Group's Oberon in Whitefield, and the Sanctuary Group's Artisan and Eden in Yelahanka and Doddaballapur. Divyashri Developers also has the Base Camp in Chikballapur. In Chennai, Hub 6 by Divyashri Developers, the Alliance Group's Villa Belvedere, and the Unitex Greenwood and Bridgecourt. In Noida on Yamuna Expressway, Sun World City and Golf Country by Supertech. Curiosity by Oris Infrastructure, and NS Group's Prime View in Sector 166. And of course, Raheta Developers Aranya City in Gurgaon on Sona Road. All right, time to answer a few questions. Rajesh has written in, he wants to buy land for residential and agricultural purposes in Tamil Nadu or in Kerala at reasonable rates. Please advise. This is interesting. He says reasonable rates. He hasn't quantified. But just for someone with that question right now, he wants to buy land either in Kerala or in Tamil Nadu. Where would you point him? In which direction would you point him?
Go to places which are coming up, like Gulam was putting forth an argument. Go to those places which are developing. So, I mean, there are some 10-15 cities and towns within these two.
Can you name a few very quickly?
Yeah, of course. So you can look at Trichy, you can look at Madurai, you can look at even Cochin, although it's a relatively developed place. Coimbatore. So there are quite a few like these. Look at them, but don't just go blindly with the faith that if I go to a particular city, if I went to Coimbatore, I'll certainly be able to pick up a land within a reasonable rate as I define it. You will have to do your own due diligence. You will have to have enough people supporting you and providing you market intelligence in these places.
It's time for us to take a very quick break, but remember, if you have any questions for our guests, you can write to us. Email ID is at the bottom of your screen. When we come back, we'll talk about what's driving growth in the OMR belt in Chennai. Welcome back. You're watching the Property Guide on ET Now. Thank you for staying with us. Our guests are still with us, helping us make smart decisions when it comes to property. This week, the micro market under review is the old Mahabalipuram Road in Chennai. Now, this 6-lane corridor is home to some of India's major IT companies. And of course, like any other city, IT demand is driving home buyer interest as well. Prices of property have moved up about 25% in the last 2 years. And that's an interesting movement for Chennai. I'm going to quickly take a round of opinions from each of our guests. OMR in Chennai, would you say that's a good investment option? And is that, the hottest area in Chennai right now?
It is one of the most prominent areas, but also remember it is an area which has now gotten into a phase where it's being oversupplied. So whatever price rise may have happened is not going to be continuing at the same pace. It is a market which is in very high demand by IT companies and the new era companies, but it is now getting oversupplied. So vacancy rates are rising, and that's one of the challenges. I would still bat for it. I'll still go for it, but with this caveat in mind.
Jayashree, you've been looking at OMR in Chennai as well. When you look at it right now, what's your advice for someone who's looking to buy an apartment in Chennai? Should they be considering OMR, or is there an oversupply problem there?
If you're an end user, buy an OMR, because there is a lot of, it is a very livable area. There are a couple of problems of connectivity, traffic problems, but I think those are being tackled. There are about 5 flyovers coming up between from Tidal Park to Siruseri. There is a bypass coming up somewhere near Egmore, and there is a new railway line from Taramani to Kadalur via Tirupurur. So you're seeing some of the transport problems being fixed. So if you're an end user and you even a long-term end user, it's a good idea to buy, because values will go up steadily. The frenzied development is, I think, slowing down. But there are very strong economic drivers on the OMR. You have the TCS, the SIPCOT, which is one of the largest buildings there. You have the financial city in Sholinganallur. You've got the sports city. You've got a Japanese township. And anyway, it is the IT corridor, so it's always been in demand. So if you're working anywhere around that area, it's a good idea to buy in the OMR.
You talked about if you're an end user. Let's talk to investors. As an investor, does it make sense, and what sort of a capital value return can I expect from OMR?
Well, as an investor, I would not buy on OMR. It has already seen the frenzy about 3-4 years back. That whole frenzy started about 4-5 years back, because somehow they realized that if there are so many people going to work there, they would also need place to stay. And in that entire herd mentality, there have been so many of these developers who are going there and constructing houses, and these developers were going from all over, from Mumbai, from Bangalore, from Hyderabad, from all over the country, right all the way from Delhi. There have been developers who are going there and thinking that this is the next gold mine, etc. Because of that, the prices actually have gone up. Like when I remember about 5-6 years back, finding an apartment in OMR would have been a very easy task for about 2,000 rupees. Those prices have actually shot up to as much as 5,000 to 7,000 also in a few cases. Whereas the weighted average price as per our calculation is still closer to 4,500 rupees a square foot kind of a bracket. However, my problem is that this is an IT corridor. And in IT, the people, your consumers, are going to be the ones who are not going to have their salaries increasing forever for eternity. And for them, you have to if you're catering to that kind of segment, then your price will hit the ceiling faster than you can imagine.
All right, so it does make sense. If you are an end user, then it does make sense to look at OMR, especially if you're working in that neighborhood. In fact, here's a list of recommendations our experts have put together of property that's available in OMR in Chennai. If you're looking to invest in the OMR corridor in Chennai, here's a list of investment options that might make sense for you. Garden City by DLF, Baleni Hillside by BSCPL Infrastructure, Arcadia by Royal Splendor, Loftline by the House of Hiranandani, Cosmo City by Provident, Purva Swan Lake by Purvankara, Savitanjali by Marg Properties, Merita by Shobha Developers, Green 201 by Green Tree Homes and Ventures, Alta Vida by Yuga Homes, and Greenwood City by Unitech. All right, I'm being told we have time to take a couple of questions. Biswajit has written in, he wants to buy a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment in Ahmedabad in Gujarat with a budget of 30 lakh rupees. Please suggest some ready to move in options. Jayashree, could you help him with this one?
In most cities, Delhi, Mumbai, etc., 30 lakhs means you're wiped out of the market. But in a city like Ahmedabad, you have a host of options. So I was going through the site, you can get Bhopal, Gota, Vejalpur, Chandkheda. In all these places, you will get properties in your 30 lakh budget, roughly about 1,000 to 1,200 square feet apartment. In all other places except Vejalpur, which is a little more expensive, so you will get about a 600 to 700 square feet apartment. But 30 lakh is a sufficient budget in this area.
All right, let's take another question. Prasad has written in, he bought a one-bedroom apartment with Life Republic by Kolte Patil in Hinjewadi in Pune, and he's so far received good returns, he says. He wants to invest more money in Pune, and he wants to know what neighborhood he should invest in over the next 3 to 5 years. Would Talegaon or Chakan be good options? Gulam, do you want to take that one?
Well, Talegaon Chakan is entirely an industrial belt. In fact, it is the automobile hub as it is coming up. The entire, all the way up to Ranjangaon is the area which is emerging as the industrial, best industrial park in the state of Maharashtra. But that also brings in a predicament, or would I say an irony attached with it, that this is going to be an industrial housing area. And there the kind of appreciation that you expect for this locality will be restricted. The argument which I was putting forth a short while back in terms of the consumer profiling, if I have to look at the Hinjewadi area, that entire belt is an area where it is catering to IT, ITS, the salary growth levels, or the consumer width. I'm talking about the number of consumers in IT, ITS is much higher than the industrial sector. The profiling is entirely different, the consumer profiling. So if I have to look at the consumer ultimately to sell this flat off to somebody as a exit, I have a problem if I am looking at the industrial belt. I would still find another opportunity. So you would recommend that
he buys another flat in Hinjewadi?
Exactly. I would rather look out for another opportunity in that vicinity which is catering to IT, ITS, or else I would rather look at something else, say Hadapsar or Nagar Road, etc. Many of these destinations in Pune where the IT is thriving, I would rather look at that because there the turnaround is quick, you can exit faster.
All right, it keeps coming back to the same thing on this show. Follow the IT and buy property in and around those areas. Unfortunately, we've completely run out of time. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this week. It's been a pleasure. Jayashree, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. We look forward to sitting down with you again soon. That's a wrap on this show. Email ID is at the bottom of your screen. You can reach me on Twitter. Thanks for watching.